Hi, and welcome to Caterpillar Cross Stitch. My name is Ford, and this week I'm going to do a quick tutorial on how to read a cross stitch pattern. If you're very new, and especially if you're about to start your first cross stitch project, make sure that you watch this one because I might be able to save you from a heartbreaking mistake. Now, I drop new knowledge about cross stitch on this channel every single week, so make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss any of that, and it also really helps me out. If you ever learned anything from me, all you got to do to pay me back is like the video, hit that subscribe button, and leave me a comment down below. It doesn't cost you anything, but it makes a big difference for me, so I'd really appreciate it. When you're about to start your first cross-stitching project, if you take a look at your new chart, that might all seem very confusing. This could definitely look, especially if it's an old school pattern that only has symbols, doesn't also have color blocks, it can be kind of intimidating, but it's really pretty straightforward once you know what to look for. So if we take a look at the chart here, you can see that we've got little blocks of color as well as symbols. Or on this symbols only one, you can see that all we have is symbols, which can be extra intimidating. But the pattern should always come with a key, and usually it will also have an information page that has a little bit more information about the project. Like it will tell you how big it's going to be, how many stitches wide it is, and often it gives you a name for the colors. Now, if you see the name differing from your pattern versus the store where you buy it or something like that, don't worry about that because the colors are just colloquial. Those colors are actually not official. The real designation for each one of those colors is just the number. DMC gives those a number. So this key tells us what each one of these symbols means. So when I see a little triangle symbol in a square on my pattern, that means that I'm going to make one cross stitch, that's a little X, of DMC 963, which is this pink color right here. So if we look here, I can see we've got these little clusters of the triangle-shaped ones, and then all the different ones go out in different colors there. So I will be making a cross stitch of this color every time that I see a triangle symbol on the pattern. Now if you notice, this is arranged into a grid, and you can see that we've got kind of like blank graph paper looking stuff over here in the edges where we're not going to be stitching. So the full name of this particular craft is counted cross stitch because we're actually going to be counting the number of stitches, and each one of these little squares on our grid corresponds to one of the little squares on our fabric. You can see we've got these easily noticed holes in the fabric. Now the fabric that I've got right here is actually kind of low quality, but I picked it because it's got big holes. The big holes make it easily visible for me to show you, but usually it makes the finished project look not quite as good. So I would actually caution against fabric that looks just like this for your project. Find something with slightly smaller holes. But the distance between these holes determines how big our project will ultimately end up. But we've got the grid on the paper, we've got the grid on the fabric, and they match up. So these little lines here, you can see that each time one of the little lines on our grid matches up, we've got kind of an intersection there. That intersection corresponds to a hole in the fabric. I'm going to take just a second right now to remind you to join the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Stitch Club email. When you sign up, you'll get a free ebook with 9 free PDF cross stitch patterns in it and a digital download of our top 10 cross stitching tips. Plus, you'll be kept up to date on all of the new and upcoming products from Caterpillar Cross Stitch, including new stitch-alongs, new kits, subscription boxes, or any retreats or socials that are coming up as well. So hit the link in the description, or I'll also pin it to the first comment on this video to make sure that you don't miss out on any of that. I mentioned that there was a heartbreaking mistake that I've seen people make on their very first projects, and that is that they didn't realize that because these stitches are next to each other, that they are actually going to go through the same hole in the fabric. So when you've got a group of 4 stitches like this, that means that we're going to be making 4 little X's. 1, 2, 3, 4. And in this case, that little backward C is DMC 368. That tells us what color we're going to be using. But because we're making 4 little X's in the fabric there, that means we're actually going to be using that one hole in the fabric 4 times to make those 4 stitches. And a lot of people who just started out or doing their very first project, that doesn't seem quite right. They don't think they should be using the same hole in the fabric over and over again. And so they'll kind of space those stitches out. They'll do them not next to each other. They'll do a stitch here, and then they'll go to the first empty hole in the fabric, and they'll do another stitch. So they wind up with these stitches that are spread way out over the fabric and that don't really form that coherent image that we're looking for. So the big tip that I have, if this is your first project, is each one of those little holes in the fabric is probably going to be used multiple times for multiple stitches that are adjacent to one another. And that's the thing that, to a lot of stitchers who've been doing it for a long time, feels so obvious because we've been doing it that we don't think to mention it. But I've seen it happen enough times with brand new stitchers on their first project that it obviously is not that obvious. That was quite a sentence. So if this is your first project, I hope I'm getting to you before you've made that very common mistake, that you do use the same hole in the fabric over and over again for multiple stitches. That's going to be the biggest thing that you want to make sure you do. And from there, you generally really just kind of want to count how many stitches you're going to do. So if I were doing this group over here, I would do 4 stitches of that light pink, and then I could either move down to the next row and go this way, or I can go back here. But we're just going to count how many of stitches that we're going to do. We're going to do the same number of squares on the fabric. They correspond to one another. It's really kind of like paint by numbers or fill in the squares. You're just making those little analog pixels one at a time, and the whole thing eventually fills out to create the whole picture. Now I wanted to keep this a really quick primer here. If you're just getting started in cross stitch, you're probably really raring to go. So go ahead and get started, and I will see you next week.